"Get out. We do not take walk-ins here." The words cracked through the marble lobby like a gunshot. Heads turned. Phones paused mid-scroll. The woman standing at the center of Meridian Financial's headquarters did not move. Her heels were planted, her eyes steady, her silence sharper than any comeback. "Ma'am," the receptionist added, her tone snapping with irritation, "I said wait outside. This area is for clients, not visitors like you." That pause, the one hanging right before "visitors like you," said everything. It was not about policy, it was about appearance, skin, presence, power they could not recognize even when it stood right in front of them. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever been told to wait outside a room you actually owned? Stay with this story, because in the next 7 minutes, the meaning of ownership is about to change. Zoe Williams, 42, wore an ivory suit that caught the morning light spilling through the glass walls. No jewelry, no entourage, no excess. Just a leather case embossed with 2 letters Z, W. She came alone on purpose. The visit was meant to be quiet, a random audit. A chance to see how her own financial branch treated people who did not walk in wearing privilege. Across the lobby, under the digital stock boards, conversations buzzed like static. The guard by the elevator folded his arms, exchanging a glance with the receptionist, a young woman in gray named Candace. "She just walked in," Candace whispered. "No appointment, no name on the list." Behind them, the branch manager, Alan Doyle, approached. Mid-50s, crisp suit, a man who believed volume was the same as authority. "What's the problem?" Candace gestured toward Zoe. "Says she's here for a meeting." Alan's eyes scanned Zoe from head to toe, simple heels, clean lines, calm expression. Not what he expected of a millionaire, let alone the majority shareholder of the company whose logo gleamed behind him. "Then she can wait outside," he said flatly. The security officer shifted his stance, one hand brushing the radio on his belt. His presence said what Alan did not. "People like her don't belong here." Zoe's voice came out soft but clear. "I am exactly where I need to be." Alan smirked. "Not until I say so." Her gaze didn't waver. She looked past him, past the crowd, to the reflection in the glass wall herself, surrounded by judgment, and then back at him. 7 minutes, she said quietly. "That's how long you have before this place remembers who runs it." No one laughed. The stock board flickered. Someone in the back began recording. The air in the lobby thickened, like the moment before a storm when everyone knows something is about to break. And Zoe Williams didn't move. She waited calm, certain for the storm to arrive. The lobby of Meridian Financial was designed to impress. 40-foot ceilings of frosted glass filtered the morning sun into a calm, corporate glow. Polished marble stretched across the floor like a mirror, reflecting the navy suits and silver heels of people who believed they belonged. The air carried the faint hum of money, soft, steady, and indifferent. At the center of it all, Zoe Williams stood perfectly still. Her ivory suit looked almost out of place among the darker shades surrounding her, like a single note of silence in a song that would not stop playing. Every eye that passed over her tried to calculate something: wealth, class, permission. The conclusion was always the same: she did not fit. Behind the front desk, Candace pretended to type but kept glancing up. Her fingers moved across the keyboard without purpose, each keystroke a nervous distraction. She leaned toward Alan Doyle, the branch manager, and whispered, "She is still here." Alan did not look up from his tablet. "Then security is not doing its job." His voice was low, but sharp enough to slice the air between them. The security officer shifted again, adjusting the radio clip to his belt. He was built for enforcement, not empathy. His name tag read, M. Harris. He had seen 100 people told to wait. None of them looked like Zoe Williams. In the glass reflection of the trading screens, Zoe could see them all: the whisperers, the watchers, the ones pretending not to stare. Her expression never changed. Years of boardrooms, press conferences, and crisis meetings had trained her to survive silence. But this was different. This was not a silence she chose. This was the kind that tried to shrink her. A voice from behind broke the stillness. "Is she lost?" The question came from a young analyst near the elevator, his tone carrying both curiosity and amusement. He looked at his coworker, who smirked back. "Probably waiting for someone to sign her in," the coworker said. Zoe turned slightly, her eyes finding their reflection in the glass wall. "No," she said quietly, not to them, but to herself. I am waiting for the world to remember its manners. Candace straightened, clearly uncomfortable now that the tension had an audience. Ma'am, please, step aside, she said louder, forcing professionalism into every syllable. You are blocking the client queue. A few heads turned. Phones lifted just casually, as if checking messages, but the camera lenses were pointed her way. Alan finally stepped out from behind the counter. That will be enough, he said, striding forward. Security, escort her outside until we can verify her reason for being here. The sound of the word escort landed heavy. It was not about policy anymore. It was a performance. The guard approached, stopping a few feet away. Ma'am, if you could step outside for a few minutes. Zoe met his eyes. What will happen in those few minutes? He blinked. Excuse me? Those few minutes you are asking me to wait outside, she said, calm as stone. What changes during them? My appearance? My worth? Or just your comfort? The question hung in the air. Even Alan hesitated, but only for a moment. Enough, he snapped. Either step outside or I will have you removed. The word removed carried weight. A few analysts nearby started whispering again, their voices like insects behind glass. Zoe exhaled slowly. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than a whisper, but it carried farther than any shout. Every time you speak, she said, you tell me more about who you are. Candace's face flushed. Alan stiffened. The guard took a step back, unsure now if he was following orders or stepping into something larger than his pay grade. The elevator doors opened behind them with a soft chime. Two executives stepped out, laughing about a stock jump. The laughter died the instant they saw the scene. One of them, a tall man with a lanyard that read Vice President. Investments paused. What is going on here? Alan turned quickly. Just a misunderstanding. This woman... Zoe's voice cut through his sentence like glass splitting. This woman has a name. The room stilled again. Even the hum of the monitors seemed to dim. The vice president frowned, caught between hierarchy and hesitation. Right, he said. Well, carry on. And he walked past, too afraid to interfere, too blind to notice the name on the leather case in Zoe's hand. ZW, the same initials engraved on every employee badge in the building. Zoe glanced up at the massive digital display board above the lobby. Stocks, numbers, and tickers scrolled endlessly, green for gains, red for losses. The reflection painted over her face in streaks of light. In that glow, she saw the irony. An empire built on equity that could not see human value. Candace looked down again, fingers trembling on the keyboard. Do you want me to call upstairs? She whispered to Alan. No, he said sharply. I handle my floor my way. Zoe adjusted her sleeve, a quiet, deliberate motion that made the air shift again. Your floor, she repeated softly. Interesting choice of words. The guard's radio crackled once. The faint sound made several employees glance up. Something in the energy of the room had changed, though no one could name it yet. Alan gestured toward the door again. This is your last warning. Zoe looked around the room one more time at the mirrored floors, the glass walls, the silent witnesses holding their breath. She could feel the air tightening, the electricity of assumption humming around her. Then she smiled not with warmth, but with understanding. 7 minutes, she said again, her tone level and calm. That is all it will take. Alan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The quiet swallowed him whole. In the reflection behind him, Zoe stood framed by light and shadow, a still point in a spinning world. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, the countdown had already begun. Zoe Williams did not move. The building moved around her. A dozen screens flashed market updates, elevators hummed, shoes clicked across the marble. But in that precise spot, time had thinned to silence. It was not stillness, it was pressure, invisible but heavy. She looked toward the security guard again, noting the hesitation in his stance, the faint doubt flickering across his face. He was not cruel. He was careful, conditioned to obey tone more than truth. Alan Doyle's tone had always sounded like command. Alan turned back to his desk, muttering under his breath. Unbelievable. People think they can just walk into a financial headquarters like it is a shopping mall. His voice was not meant for anyone to hear, but it reached the ears of everyone nearby. Zoe lifted her gaze toward the mezzanine above. A glass balcony overlooked the lobby where junior staff worked behind rows of open desks. She could see them glancing down, pretending not to. Every face reflected the same question. Who is she, and how long before she is gone? Candace's voice broke the tension again. Ma'am, maybe you could wait outside until we can confirm your appointment. Oh. Zoe turned toward her, slow and deliberate. I made no appointment, she said. Candace blinked. Then what are you here for? For clarity. The answer hung in the air, puzzling enough to make Alan look up from his tablet. Clarity? He repeated. Yes, Zoe said softly. To see what this company looks like when it thinks no one important is watching. Alan's smirk returned. Then you have your answer. Zoe tilted her head slightly. Not yet. The elevator doors opened again. This time it was a courier, young, nervous, holding 2 stacks of documents and a drink carrier balanced on one hand. He saw the cluster at the front desk and froze, unsure of where to go. Alan snapped his fingers. Over here. The courier hurried over, and in his rush, one of the drink lids popped loose. Coffee splashed across the marble floor, running in thin brown lines toward Zoe's shoes. Alan sighed dramatically. Fantastic. Another mess. Candace grabbed paper towels from behind the counter. I am so sorry, ma'am, she said to Zoe automatically, then hesitated as if remembering she was not supposed to apologize to her. Alan looked at Zoe. You might want to step back before you ruin those pretty shoes. Zoe's eyes lifted from the spreading coffee stain to meet his. You spill, then you advise. How efficient. Her tone was calm, but it carried a sting that made several onlookers shift uncomfortably. The guard bent down to wipe the spill. I can handle this, he said quickly. Zoe crouched down beside him. Do you enjoy your job? She asked quietly. He looked up, startled. Yes, ma'am. I do what I have to. She nodded slowly. We all do. The guard paused. Something in her voice gentle, knowing made him stop wiping for a moment. You do not seem angry, he said softly. I have been angry before, Zoe replied. It changes nothing. Observation, however, changes everything. Oh. She stood, smooth and steady. The crowd around the desk was larger now. Phones were raised, not openly recording, but ready. Everyone wanted to see how far this would go. Alan, noticing the shift in attention, straightened his tie. All right, that is enough theater for one morning. Miss, what did you say your name was? I did not, Zoe said. Alan exhaled loudly. Then this conversation is over. You are trespassing, and I have work to do. He turned his back to her. That small gesture dismissal ignited something in the air. Zoe took one measured step forward. You are right, she said quietly. You have work to do, but you may want to finish it quickly. Alan froze mid-step, his reflection flickering in the glass wall ahead. Is that a threat? It is a schedule, Zoe replied. Candace looked between them, confused. Should I call upstairs now? Alan shook his head. No. If she wants to play games, let her. Zoe turned away, scanning the lobby. Her gaze caught on the wall of portraits near the elevator, a gallery of Meridian's board members. Every face smiling, every frame identical. She studied them for a moment. Her own portrait was not there yet. It would be soon. Alan followed her eyes. That is our leadership wall, he said proudly. People who built this company from the ground up. Zoe's mouth curved into the faintest smile. Built, she repeated. Interesting choice of verb. Oh, he frowned, uncertain why her calmness unsettled him more than her presence. The guard's radio buzzed again. A voice crackled through. Team Alpha, prepare for scheduled audit protocol. Executives arriving within 10 minutes. Alan frowned. What audit? The guard glanced at Zoe, then quickly looked away. I do not know, sir. It just came through. Alan sighed. Fine. Let them audit. I have nothing to hide. Zoe folded her arms, the light catching her wristwatch. The time read 9:43. 7 minutes, she murmured under her breath. Candace, still clutching the paper towels, heard it. Excuse me? Zoe smiled slightly. Nothing, just keeping track. Alan turned to Candace. Clean this up and escort her out before the auditors arrive. We do not need distractions when corporate shows up. Zoe spoke again, her tone cool, unhurried. You are assuming they are coming to see you. Alan blinked. Of course they are. Then you should probably wait outside, she said. The room went completely still. For a long second, no one breathed. Even the scrolling tickers seemed to slow. Alan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. That is cute, he said. You think this is your stage? Zoe's expression remained unchanged. No, it is my building. He started to respond, but the radio at the security desk interrupted, this time louder, clearer. Protocol verification for executive audit. Williams Division incoming. Every syllable landed like a gavel. Alan turned toward the guard. What did that say? The guard looked uncertain. It said Williams Division, sir. Candace whispered. Wait, like her? Alan's laugh faltered. Coincidence, he muttered. Zoe took a step forward. Her voice was calm, precise. It is not a coincidence. It is a correction. The guard's hand hovered over the radio again, waiting for instruction. Alan said nothing. The lobby had gone quiet, too quiet, like the moment before lightning. Zoe looked around once more, the eyes, the whispers, the glass, the marble, and said softly, Observation complete. Then she turned toward the elevators, leaving behind the smell of coffee, confusion, and the faint echo of authority beginning to crack. The elevator doors slid open with a muted chime, breaking the thick air that had settled over the lobby. No one moved at first. All eyes followed the sound as if the building itself had just taken a breath. Two women stepped out, one carrying a digital tablet, the other holding a slim leather case stamped with Meridian's crest. Both wore navy suits that fit like certainty. Their badges glinted under the glass light. Corporate Audit Division. Candace straightened behind the counter, trying to read their expressions. Alan Doyle forced a smile that looked more like strain than confidence. Good morning, he said quickly. We were not expecting auditors today. The lead auditor glanced at her tablet. That is precisely the point of an audit, Mr. Doyle. Her tone was measured, each word clipped and even. We are here under directive from the Williams Division. The name hit the room like an echo bouncing off steel. Zoe stood near the elevator bank, calm, silent, watching them. Candace's eyes flicked between Zoe and the auditors, realization creeping across her face like a slow dawn. Williams Division, she whispered. Alan recovered fast, his tone turning defensive. Well, you will have to excuse the confusion. We were just dealing with a small disturbance down here. He motioned toward Zoe, as if presenting evidence. The lead auditor's gaze followed his hand, landing squarely on Zoe. Is that so? Alan nodded. Yes. This woman entered without an appointment, refused to identify herself, and disrupted operations. The second auditor tapped her screen. What is your name, ma'am? Zoe's voice was smooth. You already have it. The auditor froze, glancing at the display. Her eyes widened. Then she looked at Alan, her expression cooling several degrees. Mr. Doyle, would you step aside, please? Alan frowned. Excuse me? Now. Candace swallowed hard. The security guard shifted uneasily near the front door, unsure which authority to obey. The quiet hum of trading screens above seemed to fade, replaced by the faint click of phone cameras being raised. The lead auditor turned back to Zoe. Miss Williams, she said softly, almost like a bow disguised as acknowledgement. We did not expect you to arrive this early. Alan blinked. Miss Williams? The words stumbled out of him like stones rolling downhill. Zoe met his eyes. You asked me to wait outside. Alan's face drained of color. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, searching for logic that would save him. I did not realize. You did, Zoe said. You realized exactly what you wanted to see. Candace's breath caught. The guard looked down at his shoes. The realization that had hovered over the lobby finally solidified into fact. The woman they had dismissed, questioned, and humiliated was not just a client, she was their superior. The lead auditor continued, her tone shifting to formal authority. Per internal directive, this branch is now under immediate evaluation. We will require access to staff communications, service logs, and recorded lobby footage for the last 24 hours. Alan tried to gather himself. This is unnecessary. There has been some misunderstanding. The auditor did not blink. The misunderstanding, she said, appears to have begun with you. Zoe stepped forward. Her heels clicked softly against the marble, each sound deliberate. Let us make sure that what happened here today is documented accurately. The second auditor nodded. Already recording, Miss Williams. Alan looked around, desperate for someone to speak. Candace stood rigid behind the counter, pale and silent. The guard's jaw tightened, his eyes refusing to meet hers. Zoe turned to Candace. Tell me, when you told me to wait outside, What were you protecting? Candace's lips trembled. Policy, she whispered. No, Zoe said quietly. You were protecting comfort. And comfort has cost this company more than any scandal ever could. Alan interjected, we treat all guests the same. Zoe's gaze snapped toward him, cold and clear. You do not, and that is exactly why I am here. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning, whispering through the vents, like a ghost of composure. The lead auditor looked down at her tablet again. It seems there have been prior complaints filed from this branch regarding discriminatory conduct. Alan's voice rose an octave. That is ridiculous. Those claims were never substantiated. Because they were never investigated, Zoe replied. Her tone did not rise. It did not need to. You called them isolated incidents. I call them a pattern. Alan took a step toward her, hands out in a half-plea, half-defense. Miss Williams, please, you have to understand. I was only following standard verification. You walked in without identification. Anyone would have done the same. Zoe tilted her head slightly. Would you have said the same to a man in a tailored suit and lighter skin? Alan froze. He did not answer. He could not. The guard's radio crackled again, startling him. A voice came through. Corporate board requesting live feed confirmation from Meridian Financial Branch 6. Audit in progress. Yeah. The lead auditor tapped her earpiece. Confirmed. Live feed active. Zoe turned toward the reflective glass wall where the security camera hung. Then let them watch, she said. They should see what equality looks like when it stops asking for permission. Candace pressed a trembling hand against the desk, as if steadying herself. I am sorry, she said softly. Zoe looked at her. You are not the first to learn this lesson, and you will not be the last. The apology matters less than what you do next. Alan tried one final time to recover control. If we could just handle this privately. This happened publicly, Zoe interrupted. And so will the correction. The lead auditor motioned to her partner. Lock staff access. Suspend external communications until review. The command echoed in the wide space. Screens behind the desk flickered red. The company logo dimmed, replaced by a simple notice. Compliance mode active. Employees watching from the mezzanine gasped softly. Some whispered her name, others simply stared. The guard, still by the door, finally exhaled like a man realizing the storm had passed directly over him. Zoe stepped closer to Alan, close enough that her reflection joined his in the glass. When I built this division, she said, I promised we would never confuse image with integrity. Today, you made me keep that promise. Alan's voice cracked. Are you firing me? Zoe looked at the auditors. Protocol 5, she said simply. The lead auditor nodded. Effective immediately, Mr. Doyle. You are relieved of your duties pending formal review. Alan swayed slightly, disbelief written across his face. You cannot just... Zoe's words sliced through his protest. I can, and I just did. Silence followed, vast and clean, the kind that feels like justice rather than peace. The monitors above flickered once more, then stabilized. Zoe turned to the staff, her voice low but firm. We do not wait outside anymore. We walk through every door we built. The words hung in the air long after she finished. Somewhere deep in the building, a clock struck 10 o'clock. 7 minutes had passed, and every second had rewritten the meaning of belonging. The silence that followed was not peace, it was aftermath. Alan Doyle stood frozen, the edges of his authority peeling away like old paint. His eyes darted from Zoe Williams to the auditors, then to the watching staff above the mezzanine. His voice came out as a whisper that cracked halfway through. You cannot just walk in and dismantle my branch. Zoe's expression did not change. It was never yours to begin with. Behind her, the corporate auditors began moving swiftly, unlocking terminals, inserting encrypted drives, and syncing data. Every keystroke echoed through the lobby like a drumbeat. Candace, still at the front desk, watched in disbelief as her monitor went black, replaced by a white screen reading "Access Revoked." Alan tried again, his tone rising with desperation. You think this proves something? You embarrassed your own company in front of staff and clients? For what? For truth, Zoe said evenly, and for everyone who was told to wait outside when they were already inside the system. The guard shifted his weight, uneasy. The world he knew a simple chain of command was dissolving in real time. He looked at Zoe, then at Alan, unsure which version of power was still valid. A phone buzzed on the reception counter. Candace glanced down. A notification banner flashed across the locked screen. Live stream recording. Trending. Her heart stuttered. Someone had uploaded the footage. The entire confrontation was already online. Alan noticed her face pale. "What is that?" She did not answer, but the panic in her eyes was answer enough. Zoe heard the faint ping of another phone behind her. Then another. A ripple of alerts spread through the lobby like a rising tide. The building's Wi-Fi carried the story faster than anyone could contain it. Alan stepped forward. "You need to control this before it damages the company's image." Zoe turned toward him slowly. "Image is what you hide behind. Integrity is what you build in daylight." "Isn't?" He opened his mouth again, but the lead auditor interrupted. "Miss Williams, we are securing the external feeds. The board is requesting your statement for the live review." Zoe nodded once. "Patch it through." A camera indicator above the desk blinked red. The corporate board, scattered across multiple cities, was now watching. The entire staff could feel it, the invisible gaze of executives and shareholders pressing down from unseen screens. Zoe faced the lens. Her voice did not rise, but it filled the space. "What happened here today was not unique. It was simply visible. We build towers of glass to show transparency, but we use them to reflect our comfort instead. That ends today." Alan tried to cut in. "You are making this about race." She turned to him sharply. "It was about race the moment you saw me as less than a client. It became about power when you decided you had the right to define who belongs. Now it is about accountability." Huh. Her words rolled through the room like a steady current. Candace swallowed hard, realizing every syllable was now being broadcast to thousands of employees across the company's internal network. The second auditor turned to Zoe. "Do you want to include the prior unresolved complaints in the report?" Zoe nodded. "Every one of them. No more silence folded into archives." Alan's face flushed red. "You are destroying years of work." "No," Zoe said. "I am preserving what was worth keeping." The lead auditor handed Alan a tablet. On the screen glowed a single prompt: "Confirm suspension notice." Alan's jaw tightened. "You are making a mistake." Zoe studied him. "The mistake was thinking I needed your permission." Candace looked up, voice trembling. "Miss Williams, what will happen to us?" Zoe regarded her for a moment, the hardness in her eyes softening just slightly. "That depends on what you decide to learn from this moment. The world changes one decision at a time. You can look away, or you can look inward." The guard shifted again, finally finding his voice. "I was just following orders." Zoe turned to him. "Then follow this one. Remember what fairness looks like. It starts when obedience ends." A murmur rippled through the staff above, spreading like wind through glass. The young analysts, the clerks, the assistants all frozen at their desks, watching an unspoken rule shatter right in front of them. The lead auditor's radio clicked softly. "Board chair requests confirmation. Is disciplinary protocol complete?" The auditor looked to Zoe. "Complete," Zoe said. The words carried weight, not from volume but from finality. Alan exhaled, shoulders collapsing. He looked at the employees who had once deferred to him. None met his gaze. He was invisible now, the same way he had made others feel invisible for years. Zoe turned toward the glass wall where her reflection met the city skyline. "Do you know what glass is for, Alan?" she asked quietly. "It lets light in. It does not keep people out." Alan said nothing. Candace covered her mouth, eyes glistening. Zoe faced the staff once more. "Every person in this building will complete a review of conduct and bias training before noon tomorrow. And if anyone feels this work is beneath them, the doors are open. This time you may walk through them voluntarily." The guard nodded slowly, almost to himself. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm?" The elevator chimed again, this time empty. Its polished interior reflected the entire scene. Alan standing defeated, Candace trembling, the auditors recording, Zoe illuminated by the glass light. Zoe turned toward Alan one last time. "When I was 16, I stood in a lobby like this, waiting for someone to see me. No one did. That silence built this company. I am done waiting." Her words settled like dust, soft but everywhere. Alan looked down, the tablet still glowing in his hand. With a heavy breath, he pressed the confirmation button. A soft tone sounded. His employee credentials deactivated instantly. Zoe watched the light on his badge flicker out. "That," she said, "is what accountability looks like." The auditors closed their cases. The red indicator light above the security camera dimmed to white. Somewhere upstairs, servers logged the final entry. Audit complete. Zoe stepped forward, her reflection merging with the skyline behind her. When the world tells you to wait outside, she said quietly, build the door, then hold it open for the next person. The guard opened the door not for her, but because of her. The light from the street spilled in, sharp and warm. And as Zoe walked through it, the lobby of Meridian Financial finally understood who it had been built for. Outside, the air was different. It carried the chill of morning mixed with the metallic scent of traffic and rain. Zoe Williams stepped onto the plaza in front of Meridian Financial, her reflection following her across the tall glass doors she had just walked through. She had been in that building hundreds of times before, but never like this, never as an unrecognized stranger forced to earn her own belonging. A small crowd had gathered beyond the entry steps. Some were employees from neighboring offices. Others were passers-by who had seen the live stream. They whispered, recorded, and watched her with a mix of awe and disbelief. The words "Black CEO fired them all" had already begun spreading through social feeds like wildfire. Zoe adjusted the cuff of her sleeve, her movements calm and deliberate. A car waited at the curb, sleek and black, with tinted windows and the quiet presence of something expensive enough to speak for itself. Her assistant, Nia Thompson, stepped out, phone in hand, face sharp with focus. "Ma'am," Nia said, walking quickly toward her, "the clip is everywhere. 200,000 views and climbing. Hashtag wait outside is trending across multiple platforms." Zoe's expression remained steady. "Let it trend. The world needs to remember what happens when silence finds its voice." Nia nodded, then hesitated. "Do you want me to issue the press statement now, or wait until corporate finalizes the internal memo?" Zoe looked back toward the glass tower. "Not yet. Let them sit in the quiet for a moment. They need to feel it before they hear it." Behind the tinted windows, silhouettes moved nervously inside. Alan Doyle was gone, but the echo of his arrogance lingered like a stain on the marble floor. The auditors were still there, documenting everything. Employees stood clustered, their reflections flickering against the glass like ghosts unsure which side of history they belonged to. Nia followed Zoe's gaze. "You handled that better than most people could have. Honestly, if it were me, I would have shouted." Zoe turned to her. "That is the difference between anger and authority. One burns fast, the other burns through." Nia smiled faintly, tucking her tablet under her arm. "The board wants to debrief in 30 minutes. They are calling it the Williams incident." Zoe's tone was dry. "They can call it whatever makes them feel comfortable, but make sure they understand this was not an incident. It was a revelation." A reporter pushed through the crowd, holding a microphone. "Miss Williams, can we get a statement? People are calling you the face of corporate accountability this morning. What do you have to say to those who think you went too far?" Zoe turned toward the camera, her gaze steady. "There is no such thing as going too far when all you are doing is stepping through the door you built yourself." The reporter blinked, stunned by the clarity in her tone. "And the employees who were let go? They were not fired for who they are," Zoe replied. "They were dismissed for forgetting who they serve." A hush fell over the plaza. Even the traffic noise seemed to soften. The reporter lowered her microphone, realizing she had just captured the line that would headline every broadcast tonight. Zoe turned back to Nia. "Schedule a staff-wide address for noon tomorrow. Every division, every city. I will speak to all of them myself." Nia's fingers moved quickly across her tablet. "Understood. Should I include the statement about revised hiring and training policies?" "Yes," Zoe said. "Add one more thing. I want a scholarship fund established for young women entering finance. Name it the Wait Outside Initiative." Nia looked up, surprised. "That is powerful." "It should be," Zoe said. "Every barrier broken should become a doorway for someone else." From across the plaza, a security guard from the building stepped out. It was Harris, the same man who had stood silent near the radio when Alan ordered Zoe out. His face was pale, but his posture had changed. He approached cautiously, hat in hand. "Miss Williams," he said quietly, "I wanted to apologize. I should have stopped it. I should have said something." Zoe studied him for a moment. "Do you know why you did not?" He hesitated. "Because I was afraid of losing my job. And now?" He met her eyes. "Now I am afraid of keeping it for the wrong reason." "Oh," Zoe nodded once. "That is the beginning of change. Keep walking in that direction." He looked down, exhaling a breath that sounded like relief. "Thank you, ma'am." Zoe turned back to Nia. "Tell Human Resources to reassign Officer Harris to a supervisory role in compliance training. He has seen what it looks like when silence costs too much." Nia smiled faintly. "Done." A gust of wind swept through the plaza, carrying fragments of conversation and the distant wail of city sirens. The glass tower reflected the sky above, bright, cold, unflinching. Zoe stood at the edge of the sidewalk, looking up at the company's name etched across the building. For years it had symbolized success, power, validation. Now it was something else, a reminder that power meant nothing if it could not recognize its own reflection. Nia checked her watch. "We should go. The board meeting starts soon." Zoe nodded. "Let them wait." "Excuse me?" Zoe's lips curved slightly. "For years, we have been the ones waiting outside rooms, outside respect, outside the benefit of doubt. Let them feel the silence we carried for decades. 7 minutes was enough for them to learn who I am. Now they can wait for me." The car door opened with a soft, mechanical sigh. Zoe stepped inside, the city lights flickering across her face. Through the tinted glass, she could still see the reflection of the building, tall, gleaming, uncertain. As the car pulled away, Nia's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and showed it to Zoe. A message from the corporate communication team. Public support surging. "Wait outside," trending #1 nationwide. Zoe's eyes softened, her tone low but firm. "Then maybe it is time we stop calling it a trend." "What should we call it, ma'am?" "A reckoning." The car merged into traffic, its black exterior blending into the rhythm of the city. Above them, the glass tower stood silent, its reflection divided between sky and street. Inside, policies were being rewritten, names erased and added, systems reset. Outside, the woman they had told to wait was already rewriting something much larger. For the first time in a long time, Zoe Williams allowed herself to breathe steady, certain, unshaken. The world had told her to wait. She had answered with movement. The boardroom sat 40 floors above the city, encased in glass and silence. The view stretched for miles, steel towers piercing a gray sky, the streets below glinting with morning light. But inside, the air was heavier than the clouds outside. Every seat around the long black table was filled. Executives in tailored suits shifted uncomfortably, their whispers dying as the door opened. Zoe Williams stepped in, followed by her assistant Nia Thompson and the lead auditor from the earlier incident. The sound of Zoe's heels on the marble floor echoed like a slow metronome of control. The chairman, Richard Lang, rose halfway before sitting back down, unsure if standing would look respectful or guilty. "Miss Williams," he began, voice measured, "thank you for joining us on such short notice." Zoe placed her leather case on the table and Saturday. "Short notice is how truth arrives," she said. "You do not plan it. You respond to it." Across the table, a man in a gray suit cleared his throat. "We have reviewed the footage, Miss Williams. The incident at the Meridian branch has escalated quickly online. Some of our investors are calling for damage control." Zoe's gaze drifted toward the large digital display on the wall. The words, "Wait outside movement," scrolled across several news outlets. Photos of the lobby confrontation played on repeat. "There will be no damage control," she said. "Only accountability." The chairman frowned. "With all due respect, the company's reputation is finally being aligned with reality," Zoe interrupted. "Do not confuse embarrassment with damage. One exposes truth, the other hides it." Nia stood beside her, quietly taking notes, her presence a shadow of efficiency. The chief financial officer, a woman named Janet Cole, leaned forward. "Miss Williams, we understand your intentions, but firing an entire branch staff on the spot without internal process may expose us legally. Are you certain this was necessary?" Zoe turned toward her. "Janet, tell me, if someone repeatedly stole from the company, would you ask whether firing them was necessary?" "Well, theft is different." "No, it is not," Zoe said evenly. "They stole dignity. They stole trust. They stole the kind of workplace we claim to stand for. That is a theft of culture, and it costs more than any balance sheet can measure." The room fell silent again. The soundproof walls held every word like a mirror, reflecting discomfort. Richard Lang adjusted his cufflinks, stalling for composure. Still, this could spark more scrutiny than we are ready for. We have shareholders. Shareholders invest in results, Zoe said. And the result is this. People trust companies that act, not ones that apologize. From her bag, she pulled a folder and slid it across the table. Inside are 8 pending discrimination complaints ignored by branch management. Each one includes names, timestamps, and verification logs. Today was not an outburst. It was a pattern snapping. Janet opened the folder, her face tightening as she skimmed the pages. This is substantial. Zoe leaned back, her posture calm but unyielding. That branch was a reflection of every meeting in this room. The difference is that the cameras caught it this time. Richard looked at her. You are turning this into a public reckoning, Zoe. She met his eyes without blinking. No, Richard. The public did that. I am just making sure we listen. The lead auditor stepped forward, placing her tablet on the table. To support Miss Williams' directive, we have compiled data from employee evaluations, hiring records, and promotion rates. The disparities are measurable, and they are not isolated. The screen flickered to life. Graphs appeared, bars of red and blue showing pay gaps, hiring trends, complaint resolutions. The numbers did not lie. For the first time, the board members looked less defensive and more afraid, not of Zoe, but of exposure. Zoe folded her hands on the table. I am not here to shame this company. I am here to rebuild it. But we cannot rebuild on denial. Richard sighed. You realize, of course, that public perception may frame you as hostile leadership. Some already think your actions were too aggressive. Zoe smiled faintly. When a man enforces standards, he is decisive. When a black woman enforces them, she is hostile. That framing is the reason this company needed a reckoning. The CFO hesitated. And what about Alan Doyle? Zoe's tone stayed calm. He will receive his severance per policy, pending investigation, but he will not return. The position will remain vacant until we design a new leadership program that prioritizes equity over image. A younger board member near the end of the table, a man no older than 30, spoke up for the first time. Miss Williams, people online are calling you a hero. Zoe turned to him. Heroes are reactive. I am strategic. What they call heroism is simply someone refusing to play by the old rules. Richard rubbed his temple. We need to issue a statement. If we do not define this moment, the media will define it for us. Zoe nodded. Then define it truthfully. Tell them the system worked because someone finally challenged it. Tell them Meridian does not fear accountability. It invites it. Janet looked up from the report, her voice quieter now. You really believe people will trust us again after this? They will, Zoe said, if they see we are no longer hiding behind polished glass. Nia leaned in and whispered, the live stream from earlier just passed 1 million views. Zoe did not flinch. Good. Every eye on us is an opportunity to prove something real. She stood, smoothing her jacket. If you have questions about damage, look outside. The market is not collapsing. The stock is climbing. People do not sell honesty, they invest in it. The board members exchanged uncertain glances. For the first time in years, they were not steering the conversation. Richard finally nodded, the faintest hint of respect in his eyes. Then let us begin the real audit, Miss Williams. Zoe gathered her case. It already began 7 minutes ago. She walked to the window, looking out over the city. The glass stretched from ceiling to floor, and her reflection merged with the skyline. You built these towers to be untouchable, she said softly, almost to herself. Now they are transparent. Let us keep them that way. The boardroom stayed silent. No one dared to interrupt. Zoe turned to Nia. Prepare the public address. Noon tomorrow. Every screen, every branch. Nia nodded. What should I title it? Zoe paused, then said, the 7-minute rule. Let them remember how long it takes for everything to change. As she left the room, the doors closed behind her with a sound that felt final and new all at once. 40 floors below, the lobby of Meridian Financial remained quiet, bathed in light that now felt different, brighter, sharper, unafraid. The following morning arrived with a storm. Rain slid down the glass walls of Meridian Financial's headquarters, tracing lines across the skyline like ink bleeding through paper. The city below pulsed with movement, unaware that inside those walls, history was about to be rewritten again. In the executive media suite, technicians adjusted lights and microphones. Screens flickered with countdown timers, streaming connections, and news crawls announcing the event. Meridian Global Address, the 7-minute rule. Nia Thompson paced near the control booth, headset pressed to her ear. All regional branches confirmed? She asked. Yes, ma'am, replied a technician. Every division is connected. New York, London, Dubai, Singapore. Over 100,000 employees are logged in. Nia exhaled slowly. And the media feed? Activated. Every major outlet is broadcasting. The sound of heels approached from the corridor. Zoe Williams entered, her presence filling the room without a word. She wore a dark charcoal suit today, simple and sharp, her hair tied back in a clean twist. She did not need accessories. Her calm was enough. Nia turned to her. We are live in 3 minutes. Zoe nodded once. Let them wait. Let them feel the weight of anticipation. She stepped toward the large studio window that overlooked the city. The rain had thinned to mist, blurring the edges of the skyline. Her reflection stared back at her, steady and unreadable. Behind her, the technicians whispered final confirmations. The director counted down. 60 seconds to live. Nia handed Zoe a single sheet of notes. Talking points, ma'am. Policy revisions, the new conduct framework, and the scholarship initiative. Zoe glanced at it once, then set it aside. They do not need bullet points, she said quietly. They need truth. The director's voice rose. Going live in 5, 4, 3. The studio lights flared to white. Across continents, millions of screens lit up. Offices, homes, cafes, and airports all filled with the same image. Zoe Williams standing against a backdrop of glass and rain, framed by the city she had changed. She began without greeting. Yesterday, in one of our own lobbies, a woman was told to wait outside. She was not recognized, not respected, and not believed. She was judged by sight instead of substance. That woman was me. Across the world, people leaned closer to their screens. Some knew her story already, others were hearing it for the first time. Zoe continued, her tone even, deliberate. I did not go to that branch to test anyone. I went to see whether the values we write on walls still live in our people. What I found was not a failure of policy, it was a failure of perception. She paused, letting the words settle. For decades, we have measured success by profit margins and quarterly gain. But what is profit if the people earning it cannot see humanity in one another? What is success if it silences the very voices it claims to empower? In control rooms across multiple countries, journalists exchanged glances. The feed was not a corporate statement, it was confession and conviction. Zoe's voice softened. This company was built by people who believed in access. But somewhere along the way, access turned into exclusion. The lobby where I stood was not just marble and glass, it was a mirror, reflecting who we have become. She took a breath. Today we begin again. Every branch will undergo a full review of internal culture, hiring, and leadership practices. Every complaint, no matter how old, will be reopened and examined. And starting this quarter, a percentage of our profits will go directly to funding the Wait Outside initiative, a scholarship and mentorship program for young professionals who were told the same words I heard. You do not belong here. The camera cut closer, capturing the steady light in her eyes. Let me be clear. This is not punishment. It is restoration. Accountability is not revenge, it is repair. The line struck through the silence like thunder in the distance. Zoe continued. To those who worked with integrity, thank you. To those who stood by quietly while others were humiliated, I offer you a choice. You can defend the past, or you can define the future. But you cannot do both. Her voice carried the weight of something older than the company itself, the voice of generations who had waited outside rooms they built. In 7 minutes, I saw how fast the truth can travel. In 7 minutes, a lie that lived for decades collapsed under its own arrogance. So, remember this, 7 minutes can ruin you, or it can redeem you. The choice will always belong to the one who listens. The camera cut wider. Behind her, the city gleamed wet and alive, skyscrapers glowing through the rain like sentinels of progress. Zoe's expression softened for the first time. To those who have ever been turned away, questioned, or diminished, your worth was never measured by their comfort. Your silence was never proof of your weakness. It was the world's reminder that strength does not always shout. Sometimes it simply stands still and waits for justice to catch up. She looked straight into the lens. We have waited long enough. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the lights. Then Zoe lowered her hands and stepped back. That will be all. The broadcast ended. The screens across the world faded to black. Inside the studio, no one spoke. The technicians stared, unsure whether to applaud or breathe. The director turned to Nia. Did she just end it like that? Nia smiled. She does not need applause. The silence is the applause. Zoe walked toward the exit, calm, centered. As the door closed behind her, the first wave of reactions began flooding in. On social media, thousands of posts appeared within seconds. Hashtags multiplied. 7-minute rule. Wait outside. Williams' speech. In offices across the world, employees turned to one another, some inspired, some uneasy, all changed. By the time Zoe stepped into the hallway, her phone buzzed once. Nia caught up beside her. The live metrics just updated. 30 million views and climbing. Zoe did not slow down. Good. Let the world watch. Change is not quiet anymore. The rain outside finally stopped, leaving the glass windows streaked but clear. The sky broke open to a pale light that touched every building, every reflection. And in that moment, even the city seemed to understand what she had just said. Silence was over. The world moved fast after the broadcast. But inside Zoe Williams's car, the world was quiet. The hum of the electric engine was soft, almost meditative. Rain still clung to the glass, distorting the skyline as the vehicle glided through downtown traffic. Nia sat across from her, tablet glowing in her lap. Notifications poured in a flood of statements, endorsements, and demands. The reaction is massive, she said, scrolling. Government officials are quoting you. The Secretary of Labor just retweeted your speech. Even rival companies are issuing new diversity pledges within hours. You may have just shifted corporate America in one morning. Zoe looked out the window. Let them shift, she said quietly. But let them sustain, Nia hesitated. There is more. Not everyone is celebrating. Some employees are calling you authoritarian, saying the firings were too extreme. They claim you embarrassed the company in public. Zoe smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both fatigue and conviction. If integrity embarrasses them, they should examine what they are loyal to. Nia looked at her, searching her face. Do you ever get tired of fighting these battles? Zoe's eyes stayed on the window. You do not get tired of breathing, you get tired of suffocating. This, she said, gesturing toward the rain-streaked city, is air. The car slowed at a traffic light. Outside, a group of people stood under umbrellas, watching through the glass. Some held their phones, others simply waved. One young woman pressed her palm to her chest and mouthed, "Thank you." Zoe met her eyes through the glass and nodded once. The light turned green. The car pulled forward, leaving ripples in the wet street behind them. Back at Meridian's headquarters, the ripple was now a wave. Departments that had once operated like fortresses were suddenly transparent. Internal chat rooms buzzed with debate. Employees were confronting managers, asking questions that had been swallowed for years. Why did that person get promoted over me? Why do we not have more diversity on our leadership board? What does fairness really look like here? In the compliance office, the lead auditor, Naomi Chen, watched the numbers climb on her screen. Reports, complaints, suggestions, over 5,000 submissions in under 4 hours. It was chaos, but it was movement. She turned to her assistant. This is what systemic correction looks like, she said. Messy, loud, necessary. The assistant nodded, overwhelmed. Do you think Miss Williams knows how big this is becoming? Naomi smiled. She planned for it. Meanwhile, in an upscale restaurant across town, Alan Doyle sat alone at a corner table, his untouched glass of bourbon sweating on the white linen cloth. His phone buzzed endlessly with missed calls and unread messages, but none from the people he had once considered allies. On the mounted television above the bar, the replay of Zoe's address filled the screen. Her voice carried even through the low hum of conversation. Alan stared at it, jaw tight. She ruined me, he muttered under his breath. A man at the next table looked up. Or maybe she just exposed you. Alan turned sharply, but the stranger had already gone back to his meal. He reached for his drink and froze when he noticed a notification flashing on his phone. Meridian Board Statement. Official. He opened it. The text was short, surgical. Pending review, Mr. Alan Doyle's employment has been permanently terminated with cause. Effective immediately. Alan exhaled slowly, his hand trembling. Around him, laughter filled the restaurant, a sound that suddenly felt foreign, like a language he no longer spoke. He looked back up at the television, where Zoe was saying, 7 minutes can ruin you, or it can redeem you. The irony was not lost on him. Across the city, a different kind of meeting was taking place. In a small cafe filled with the scent of roasted coffee and rain-soaked coats, a young woman named Tasha Green sat with a group of co-workers watching the replay on her laptop. She was one of Meridian's newest analysts, 26 years old, first-generation college graduate, and one of the few black women in her department. "I cannot believe she actually said it," one coworker whispered. "She looked right into the camera and called them out. On a global broadcast." Tasha smiled softly. "She said what we all think but are afraid to lose our jobs over." Another coworker leaned closer. "Do you think things will actually change?" Tasha's smile faded into something more reflective. "They already did. I walked into work today, and for the first time, people looked at me like I belonged there. Not because I am different, but because they were afraid to pretend I do not." The table went quiet. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. By afternoon, the clouds broke open into sunlight. Zoe's car pulled into the underground garage of her private office building, her personal division headquarters, Williams Capital Holdings. Nia followed her into the elevator. "The board reports that share prices are up 4% since your speech aired. Public trust metrics are rising. The phrase, 7-minute rule, is being quoted in business schools and universities already." Zoe pressed the elevator button and said softly, "It is not about fame, Nia. It is about standard. If we do not set it, someone else will lower it." The doors opened to the executive floor, a space designed in minimalist tones, quiet but commanding. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city, now bathed in gold light. On Zoe's desk sat a single folder delivered earlier that morning. The cover bore one word: complaints. Historical. It contained years of ignored grievances, sealed under resolved labels that were anything but. She placed her hand on it for a moment, then opened it. Inside were stories, too many of them. A woman whose promotion vanished after maternity leave. An analyst told she was too loud. A janitor disciplined for asking for fair pay. Zoe read each one slowly, the paper crackling softly as if the pages themselves were exhaling after being held down too long. She closed the folder. "No more waiting outside," she said to herself. Nia looked at her. "What is next?" Zoe turned toward the window. The reflection of the skyline shimmered over her face. "Next," she said, "we build the culture they promised us but never delivered." Nia smiled. "And after that?" Zoe's answer came quietly, but with certainty. "After that, we teach them what leadership looks like when it no longer needs permission." The city stretched out before them, alive, shifting, and changed. And for the first time, every window in those towers felt less like walls and more like possibilities waiting to be seen. Night fell slowly over the city, washing the glass towers in shades of silver and blue. Inside the top floor of Williams Capital Holdings, the lights stayed on long after most offices had gone dark. Zoe Williams sat at her desk, surrounded by quiet. The only sound was the steady tap of rain returning against the window. In front of her were the files she had pulled earlier, pages of unresolved complaints, archived reports, and forgotten voices. She had read through half of them already, each one a wound disguised as paperwork. A janitor accused of stealing office supplies when the cameras later proved he had not. A woman in accounting denied a raise because she lacked cultural fit. A man transferred after speaking up for a colleague who had been harassed. Every story carried the same pattern: silence, denial, dismissal. Nia entered softly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You should rest," she said. "It has been a long day." Zoe shook her head. "Rest is a privilege I cannot afford yet." Nia set the cup down beside her. "Then at least drink something warm. You have read 50 reports in one sitting." Zoe smiled faintly. "That is 50 steps closer to cleaning the system." She looked down at another file. "People think corruption is loud. It is not. It hides in memos. It thrives in signatures." Nia took a seat across from her. "The news outlets are still covering your speech. Every network is calling it the turning point of the decade. You have senators quoting you on the floor. You have CEOs pretending they agreed with you all along." Zoe looked up, her expression unreadable. Pretending is the oldest form of survival in power. But even pretending has its usefulness. It spreads the words faster than belief ever could. Ugh. Nia nodded. There is something else. She slid a tablet across the desk. You asked me to monitor internal reactions from Meridian's lower branches. One of them sent an anonymous message. You should see this. Zoe tapped the screen. The message was short. Thank you. I was the one who filed a complaint 3 years ago that never reached you. I thought no one would ever listen. Now they have no choice. Zoe read it twice, then leaned back in her chair. The exhaustion in her shoulders lifted slightly. Anonymous truth, she murmured. The most honest kind. Nia looked at her closely. You are changing things, Zoe. You know that, right? Zoe's tone softened. Change does not belong to one person. I am just the one who refused to wait for permission. A flash of lightning lit the skyline behind her, followed by the low rumble of thunder. For a moment, the reflection in the glass showed Zoe surrounded by light, her figure framed like the calm center of a storm. Across the city, in a newsroom buzzing with energy, journalists replayed clips of Zoe's address. A producer leaned toward her editor. She did not even read from notes. Not one word. The editor replied without looking up. That is what makes it dangerous. You cannot debate conviction. Back in the office, Nia checked her watch. It is almost midnight. Zoe stood, stretching slightly. Then it is almost tomorrow. She walked toward the large digital display mounted on the wall. It showed live metrics from social media. 38 million views, 70 countries reporting coverage, 100,000 comments tagged under number 7-minute rule. She stared at the numbers for a moment. Do you know what scares me most about success, Nia? Nia tilted her head. Losing it? No, Zoe said quietly. Believing it means the work is done. She turned off the screen. The numbers disappeared, replaced by her reflection in the dark glass. Every movement dies when it becomes a memory instead of a mission. Nia smiled softly. Then I guess we keep moving. Before Zoe could answer, her phone vibrated. She picked it up and read the message. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Problem? Nia asked. Zoe handed her the phone. On the screen was a text from an unknown number. Not everyone believes in your revolution. Some of us built those doors for a reason. Stop before you destroy what made us strong. Nia frowned. Anonymous threat? Warning, Zoe corrected. But warnings only confirm impact. She walked back to her desk and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. Start drafting a new internal memo. Title it Protocol Renewal. Every department head will submit transparency reports by the end of the week. I want to see who supports change and who only performs it. Nia began typing immediately. And what happens to those who refuse? Zoe's eyes hardened slightly. They will answer to the same system they built. The rain grew heavier. Outside, lightning flashed again, illuminating the skyline in pulses of white and silver. Zoe returned to the files and opened one marked case, 72B. It detailed a discrimination claim, dismissed without investigation. The signature at the bottom of the rejection letter belonged to Alan Doyle. She traced her finger over the ink, not out of anger, but closure. Nia's voice was quiet. Do you ever regret being the one to carry this? Zoe looked out the window. The storm reflected against the glass, painting streaks of light across her face. Regret is what happens when you fail to use pain for purpose. I learned a long time ago that pain can be recycled. It becomes power when you refuse to waste it. Nia watched her silently, understanding that this was not defiance, it was endurance. A clap of thunder rolled across the city. Zoe closed the file and stood again. Send copies of the new memo to every branch before dawn, and add a line at the bottom. What should it say? Nia asked. Zoe looked back at her, voice calm, steady. It should say, we no longer wait outside our own doors. Nia nodded and began typing. As Zoe turned toward the window one last time, the storm finally began to ease. The rain softened to a whisper against the glass, and through it, the first faint light of morning began to rise over the horizon. The city was still restless, still loud, still flawed. But for the first time, it looked like a place that was listening. Zoe closed her eyes briefly, breathing in the quiet. Then she said softly, almost to herself, tomorrow begins with truth. And as the clock struck midnight, the world shifted again one more step toward a future no longer waiting outside. The morning after the storm rose clear and sharp, sunlight breaking through clouds that had spent all night shedding their weight. From her office window, Zoe Williams watched the city wake. Cars streamed through the wet streets below, each one catching the light in quick silver flashes. For once, the city seemed quiet, not in sound, but in spirit, like something had exhaled. The quiet did not mean peace. It meant anticipation. On her desk lay a stack of reports, each one bearing the Meridian logo now rebranded with a subtle but deliberate addition. A small circle enclosing the word integrity. She had insisted on that word. It was not a slogan, it was a promise. Nia entered carrying a breakfast tray and 2 folders. Coffee, fruit, and the morning fallout, she said, placing them neatly in front of Zoe. Zoe arched an eyebrow. Fallout? Nia nodded. You are everywhere again. Major outlets are running your full speech on rotation. Social feeds are quoting you every 3 seconds. But some networks are already framing it as corporate overreach. They are saying you turned accountability into theater. Zoe picked up the folder, marked Media Watch, and flipped through the headlines. Theater reaches people faster than policy, she said evenly. If they need drama to hear truth, then so be it. Let them watch. Nia hesitated before handing over the second folder. There is something else. The internal memo you sent last night, protocol renewal, was leaked to the press within hours. Every department knows the transparency review is real. Some employees are panicking. Zoe took a sip of her coffee. Good. Panic wakes the conscience. Nia smiled faintly. You always did know how to weaponize silence. Zoe looked at her, the corner of her mouth curving slightly. Silence is only dangerous when it belongs to the wrong people. The intercom buzzed. Zoe pressed the button. Yes? The receptionist's voice came through, careful and formal. Miss Williams, there is someone here to see you. A Mr. Harris. He says you know him. Zoe set her cup down. Send him in. A moment later, the glass doors opened, and Officer Marcus Harris, the security guard from the Meridian lobby, stepped in, hat in hand. His posture was respectful, but not timid. Something about him had changed. Miss Williams, he said softly, I did not want to intrude, but I wanted to thank you for giving me another chance. Zoe gestured toward the chair across from her. Sit, Marcus. You are not intruding. He sat carefully, holding his hat in his lap. You reassigned me to compliance training. I thought it was a punishment at first, but now... He paused, looking down. I think it might be the best thing that ever happened to me. Ugh. Zoe leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. Tell me what you have learned. Marcus took a deep breath. That power does not always shout. Sometimes it just stands there, waiting to be recognized. And that waiting is the hardest part. I have watched the footage 100 times, ma'am. I saw myself in it, not what I did, but what I did not do. I froze. Because that is what the world teaches us to follow, not to question. I will not freeze again. Zoe nodded slowly. Growth begins when guilt turns into responsibility. He looked up. I just wanted you to know that I am trying to be the kind of person I should have been that day. Zoe's tone softened. Then you already are. The room was still for a moment. Outside, sunlight broke fully across the skyline, washing the glass walls in gold. Nia cleared her throat gently. Miss Williams, the board requested a follow-up statement regarding the implementation of your new reforms. They want to know how you plan to enforce compliance without creating fear. Zoe turned toward her. Fear is the tool of the old system. We will use transparency instead. I want every employee to know the rules, not as threats, but as truths. She stood and walked toward the large glass wall overlooking the city. Her reflection appeared beside the skyline, solid and luminous. We have built companies that pretend to be families and families that behave like corporations. It is time to rebuild both. Marcus stood as well, hat still in hand. If you ever need someone to speak about what happened at training or anywhere, I will do it. People need to hear from someone who got it wrong before they can understand how to get it right. Zoe turned to him. You are already part of the story, Marcus. Use it. Teach it. He nodded firmly. Yes, ma'am. As he left, Nia turned to Zoe. You realize that man will change more minds in one speech than 1,000 memos. Zoe smiled faintly. That is the point. Change does not scale from the top, it echoes from the bottom. The intercom buzzed again. The receptionist's voice was tenser this time. Miss Williams, you have a call on line 1. It is urgent. They said it is about the old audit archives. Zoe frowned and picked up the receiver. This is Williams. A voice came through Naomi Chen, the lead auditor. Miss Williams, we have found something. It is about Alan Doyle. Zoe's tone did not change, but the air in the room seemed to still. Go on. Naomi hesitated. When we cross-checked the records from the last 5 years, we found encrypted data files that do not match company storage log. It looks like someone deleted several complaint documents, dozens of them, but not before rerouting copies to an off-site account. The access trail leads back to Doyle's credentials. Nia's eyes widened. Zoe stayed composed. Can you retrieve the data? We are trying, Naomi said. But whoever encrypted them knew what they were doing. We may need authorization to subpoena the external servers. Do it, Zoe said, and Naomi find out who else had access. Alan did not build a network alone. Yes, ma'am, Naomi replied. We will have a report by evening. Zoe hung up slowly, her expression unreadable. Nia broke the silence. If those files are real, this goes beyond one branch. This means the discrimination was being hidden deliberately, systemically. Zoe looked at her. We suspected it. Now we prove it. Nia nodded, already reaching for her tablet. Should I prepare a press strategy in case it leaks? Zoe shook her head. No, we release it ourselves. Truth does not leak, it arrives. She turned back to the window, eyes fixed on the city that shimmered under the morning Sunday. The silence is ending, Nia. But before it ends for everyone, it has to end here first. Nia stood beside her, both women framed against the glass and light. Then let us finish what they started hiding. Zoe nodded. Yes, let us bring the light into every room that once told us to wait outside. And as the day rose higher, so did the next storm, one not of rain, but of revelation. By late afternoon, the building pulsed with a quiet unease. The discovery of Alan Doyle's encrypted files had spread through the upper floors like a rumor with teeth, half fear, half fascination. People spoke in lowered voices, glancing toward the glass-walled office at the end of the corridor where Zoe Williams now stood. The skyline behind her glowed amber as the sun began to descend. She held a tablet in one hand, reviewing the early findings from the audit division. Nia stood nearby, pacing. Naomi just sent an update, Nia said. The deleted files are older than we thought. Some date back almost 10 years. Complaints about bias, pay inequity, even retaliation. The evidence trail shows multiple sign-offs. Zoe looked up. Sign-offs from whom? Nia hesitated. Department heads. At least 4 of them still employed in executive positions, including one sitting board member. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and deliberate. Zoe set the tablet down on her desk, her movements measured. Prepare an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Full attendance required. Nia nodded, her fingers moving quickly over her tablet. Do we alert the legal department? Not yet, Zoe said. I want truth before strategy. The intercom buzzed softly. Miss Williams, Naomi Chen is here to see you, the receptionist announced. Send her in. Naomi entered, a folder pressed to her chest, her face a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. Miss Williams, we confirmed it. Alan Doyle and his team deliberately suppressed complaints from minority employees across multiple branches. They marked them as resolved without action and encrypted the originals in a private server. We have partial access to those files now. Zoe gestured toward the chair across from her. Show me. Naomi opened the folder and spread several printed pages across the desk. Each one carried a story, a voice that had been silenced under the weight of bureaucracy. A black senior analyst demoted after training a less qualified replacement. A Latina project manager fired after reporting harassment. A disabled employee denied medical accommodations and labeled non-compliant. Zoe read each line slowly, her jaw tightening with every page. How many total? Naomi took a breath. So far, 74 confirmed cases, more pending. Nia's voice dropped to a whisper. 74. Zoe straightened. Compile them into a single report. Every name, every timestamp, every signature that authorized suppression. Do not alter a word. Naomi nodded. Understood. There is one more thing. She hesitated, glancing between them. The oldest file, the first one Alan ever deleted, it was about you. The room went still. Zoe's eyes lifted, sharp but calm. Explain. Naomi placed a single sheet on the desk. The document was dated 12 years ago, when Zoe had been a young analyst rising quickly through Meridian's ranks. The report detailed a complaint she had filed after being denied access to a high-level leadership program despite exceeding every qualification. The reason cited, not an ideal cultural representative. Nia inhaled sharply. They buried your own file. Zoe stared at the page. She remembered that day the meeting room filled with polite dismissal, the unspoken truth heavy in every glance. She had learned then that silence was armor. She looked back up, voice steady. Good. Leave it in the report. Let them see what their history looks like. Naomi nodded, clearly moved. Yes, ma'am. Naomi, Zoe added quietly, how many people helped you recover these records? 8, Naomi said. Mostly junior analysts. They worked through the night. Reward them, Zoe said. Publicly. Let every employee know who brought the truth back. Yes, ma'am. When Naomi left, Nia closed the office door behind her and turned back to Zoe. They buried your story, Zoe. They took your voice and locked it away. Zoe shook her head. They tried, but stories do not die in silence. They wait.
Ugh.
She walked toward the window, looking out at the city below. Every person in those files waited too. Now it is our job to make sure their waiting ends. Nia followed, her reflection appearing beside Zoe's in the glass. Tomorrow will not be easy. You are about to confront people who have built entire careers on pretending this never happened. Zoe's voice was low but firm. Then they will face what they built. Oh. She turned back to her desk and began writing notes by hand, her pen gliding in even, precise strokes. Tomorrow morning, I will call for a vote to reopen all disciplinary reviews and reinstate any employee terminated under falsified grounds. Every executive who signed those approvals will be suspended pending investigation. Nia raised an eyebrow. That will include people very high up, Zoe. You may lose allies. Zoe paused, then looked up. Allies are convenient. Integrity is permanent. The city lights flickered on, one by one, until the skyline glowed like circuitry, every window a pulse, every building a heartbeat. Nia broke the silence again, softer now. Do you ever think about what might have happened if you had not gone to that branch that day? Zoe smiled faintly. Then none of this would have been seen. They would have kept their illusion of fairness, and we would still be waiting outside. Nia nodded slowly, understanding. Sometimes it takes one act of humiliation to light a century of change. Zoe closed the folder in front of her. Then let the century begin. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, though the storm had long passed. It was not rain this time, it was movement, energy building toward revelation. Zoe looked out the window again. The reflection of the city merged with her own, the glow of light against glass, creating the illusion of something infinite. Tomorrow, she said softly, we walk into the boardroom not as guests, but as owners. Nia smiled. And if they try to close the door again? Zoe's eyes did not leave the skyline. Then we take the hinges, too. The two women stood in silence, watching the lights of the city tremble under the approaching night. Somewhere below, in the quiet corners of the company, whispers of change spread again. And though the sun had set, it felt less like an ending, more like the world turning its face toward a dawn that could finally see itself clearly. Morning arrived, dressed in steel light. The air was cool and thin, the kind of morning that made a city feel both restless and expectant. On the 40th floor of Meridian's central tower, the boardroom lights flickered on one by one, reflecting across polished glass and polished nerves. Zoe Williams stood at the head of the long conference table, facing the wall of windows. Behind her, the city stretched out in grids of gray and gold, waking slowly under her gaze. In front of her sat 12 board members, each with a stack of documents, a nameplate, and an expression caught between caution and fear. The silence in the room was not comfortable, it was waiting. Nia Thompson stood near the side panel, operating the projector that displayed the title on the screen. Internal Audit Review, Confidential Evidence Report. Zoe turned to face them. Her voice carried the same calm that had once unsettled an entire lobby. Thank you for coming on time. What we discuss today is not about one branch, one manager, or even one company. It is about a culture that has worn politeness like armor and used it to protect prejudice. A low murmur ran around the table. The chairman, Richard Lang, shifted in his seat. Miss Williams, before we proceed, may I remind you that this is an internal meeting. The tone should remain professional. Zoe met his eyes without flinching. Professionalism without conscience is performance. I am here for something deeper. Nia pressed a button. The lights dimmed, and the first slide appeared on the screen, a series of redacted reports, timestamps, and digital signatures. This, Zoe said, is the evidence of systemic suppression within Meridian. 74 confirmed cases so far, spanning 10 years. Most of these were closed under the category resolved without action. Janet Cole, the chief financial officer, leaned forward. Are we certain these are authentic? 10 years is a long time. Naomi Chen, seated beside Nia, answered calmly. We verified every document through cross-reference server backups and metadata trails. The digital signatures match those of current executives. The boardroom fell silent again. The sound of the city below distant horns, the faint rush of traffic seeped faintly through the glass. Zoe walked around the table, stopping beside each printed dossier. These papers are not mistakes. They are decisions, and decisions reveal belief. Richard Lang cleared his throat. Miss Williams, if this information is as serious as it appears, we will need to manage disclosure carefully. We cannot risk public panic. Zoe turned to him slowly. The only people who panic when truth arrives are those who profited from silence. Across the table, one of the older members, a man named Paul Henson, spoke up. We understand your frustration, but we cannot punish everyone for the errors of a few. Business depends on stability. Stability built on suppression is collapse waiting for its cue, Zoe said. What you call stability, others experience as suffocation. Nia advanced the slide. On the screen appeared a familiar name, Alan Doyle. Beneath it, lines of data linking his credentials to hidden complaint archives, unauthorized deletions, and off-site servers. This man, Zoe said, was not acting alone. The investigation found that 4 other executives participated in redirecting complaints to untraceable storage. 3 of them sit at this table. Gasps filled the room. Richard straightened, color draining from his face. You are making accusations without... Zoe raised a hand. Without what, Richard? Without permission? The evidence is right there. She turned to the screen again. Each of you signed off on terminations marked insubordination, that were, in reality, retaliation. You silenced voices that challenged you. Now we will give them back their sound. Paul Henson slammed a hand on the table. This is outrageous. You cannot... Zoe's gaze cut through him like glass. Outrage is the privilege of the exposed. You used policy to bury people's dignity. I am using it to dig them out. Nia pressed another button. The slide changed to an audio waveform. This, Nia said, is a recording recovered from Alan Doyle's office 2 years ago. The room went still. A man's voice filled the speakers. Alan's voice, confident and cruel. We do not need another diversity complaint making the news. Close it. If they push, threaten legal review. They will back down. They always do. The silence that followed was suffocating. Zoe stepped closer to the table. Always. That word right there is the problem. You assumed silence was permanent. You were wrong. Janet looked pale. Zoe, you are about to destroy what remains of this board's credibility. Zoe turned toward her. No, Janet, I am about to rebuild it. Credibility that depends on secrecy is not real, it is theater. She looked around the table, her eyes steady. Every person whose name appears in these files will receive a direct apology and reinstatement offer within 48 hours. Full compensation, public acknowledgement, and a seat at the review panel for future equity policy. Meridian will no longer repair its image by painting over cracks. We will rebuild the foundation. Richard Lang leaned back, voice trembling slightly. You cannot just bypass the board. We have protocols. Protocols are for those who have earned trust, Zoe said. You lost that privilege the moment you traded fairness for comfort. Nia advanced one final slide. It was a single sentence, white on black. We no longer wait outside our own doors. Zoe's voice softened but grew stronger in weight. That sentence will appear on every screen, every policy, every building this company owns. It will remind us who we are supposed to be. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Richard exhaled and said quietly, You have changed this place forever, Zoe. That. She looked out the window, the light glinting against her reflection. That was always the point. The room stayed silent, except for the hum of the projector and the distant pulse of the city below. Finally, Zoe turned back to the board. This meeting is adjourned. The truth will not wait another day. She gathered the files, each page a fragment of justice long overdue, and walked toward the door. As she left the room, the wall of glass behind her reflected not just her figure but the faint glow of the sunrise pushing through clouds, a mirror of change, vast and unstoppable. And in that reflection, the board members saw not just the woman they had underestimated, but the future they could no longer avoid. The hours that followed were the kind of hours that divide history, the quiet before systems collapse, and the clarity that comes after truth refuses to leave the room. By noon, word of the board meeting had leaked. Every major outlet carried the headline, "Williams orders internal reckoning at Meridian, executives under review for systemic suppression." Cameras gathered outside the building. Former employees called reporters. The story that began with one act of humiliation had become a national conversation about power, race, and silence. Inside the executive tower, the atmosphere was electric-charged, uncertain, unsteady. Employees walked the halls whispering her name. Zoe Williams had become something larger than a CEO. She was now a mirror. Every person who had ever looked away from injustice was being forced to see themselves reflected back. Zoe stood in her private office, arms crossed, watching the crowds gather below through the tall glass. The sound of helicopters pulsed faintly above the skyline. Her assistant, Nia, entered with the measured urgency of someone trying to hold chaos in her hands. "Miss Williams," Nia said, "the statement you ordered has gone live across the network. The internal portal is flooded with messages, some supportive, some furious." Zoe nodded. "Let it happen. Every reaction is proof that silence has cracked." Nia hesitated before continuing. "Legal counsel advises that releasing names before the review concludes could expose us to defamation suits." Zoe turned from the window. "We are not defaming anyone. We are describing them accurately." Nia seethed quietly. "You know, this is more than a corporate shift now. It is becoming political. Lawmakers are quoting you in speeches. Your face is on every screen in Times Square." Zoe gave a soft, knowing smile. "Fame is what the world gives you when it cannot understand conviction." Nia stepped closer. "Conviction can still make enemies." Zoe looked down at the street again. "Good. Change without resistance is decoration." At that moment, the intercom buzzed. The receptionist's voice came through, hesitant. "Miss Williams, you have a visitor. He says it is urgent. A Mr. Richard Lang." Zoe exchanged a glance with Nia. "Send him in." The door opened, and Richard Lang, the chairman, her superior on paper, entered with the rigid posture of a man who had not slept. His tie was loosened, his face pale. He carried a folder that trembled slightly in his hand. "Zoe," he began, his tone almost pleading, "you are pushing this company toward a public collapse. Do you understand what you have started?" Zoe remained still. "What I started? Richard, I simply revealed what you built." He exhaled sharply. "We cannot survive this level of exposure. The board is fracturing. Investors are threatening to pull out. We are bleeding credibility by the minute." Zoe walked slowly around her desk, her heels tapping against the marble like a clock. "You are not bleeding credibility, Richard. You are shedding pretense." "Ugh." He raised his voice, the tremor of desperation rising. "You want to burn it all down? Is that it? You think you can rebuild an empire on righteousness?" Zoe stopped a few feet away from him. "Empires built on silence collapse faster than the ones built on greed. At least greed admits it is hungry. Silence pretends to be innocent." Richard slammed the folder onto her desk. "You are making enemies at the highest levels. The government is watching. The shareholders are meeting without you. They are planning a vote of no confidence." Zoe regarded him evenly. "Then let them vote. But remember what happens when you put conscience on a ballot. It wins by memory, not by majority." He stared at her, baffled. "You cannot run a company on emotion." Zoe smiled faintly. "I am not. I am running it on accountability. That is rarer than profit." The room went still again. Richard's anger deflated into something closer to disbelief. "You really believe you can erase everything wrong with one speech, one investigation, one—" Zoe interrupted him softly, her tone razor-sharp. "No, I believe I can begin. And beginnings are the one thing the powerful fear most." Nia spoke for the first time. "Mr. Lang, the public is not reacting to chaos. They are reacting to honesty. For the first time, they are seeing a company admit it has a soul." Richard turned toward her, shaking his head. "You are naive if you think this ends with applause." Zoe's voice grew calm again. "I do not need applause. I need a precedent." Richard hesitated, his grip tightening on the folder. Then, almost reluctantly, he opened it. Inside were several printed emails, correspondences between board members discussing the deletion of internal complaints, including his own replies. He placed the folder on the desk and looked at her. Naomi found them, did she not? Zoe's expression did not change. Truth always finds its way home. He took a long breath. You have already won, Zoe. The press, the employees, the public, they all believe you. But if you release those files, you destroy everything I built, everything my father built. Zoe looked at him quietly. Then maybe it was not worth building. He took a step forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. You think you can live with the weight of that? With the fallout? Zoe met his eyes. I have lived with heavier things. I have lived with being unseen. He froze at that, the words hitting deeper than accusation. For a moment, the rage drained from his face, replaced by something fragile. What happens to me after this? He asked softly. Zoe's tone remained even. You will answer for your part, Richard. But I will not destroy you. You will stay. You will watch the company you ignored become something worth existing for. That is your sentence, witness. He exhaled, the fight leaving his shoulders. You sound like a judge. Zoe turned back toward the window, her reflection sharp against the glass. No, she said. A judge passes sentences. I create standards. Richard stared at her for a long moment, then picked up his folder and walked out, his steps slow and hollow. Nia closed the door behind him and turned to Zoe. You just dismantled your last obstacle. Zoe shook her head. No, I dismantled denial. The obstacle is still culture, and culture is slower to confess. She looked out at the horizon where the sun was setting in streaks of orange and red. The light burned through the glass, washing her in fire. The hardest part is not exposing corruption, she said quietly. It is teaching the world how to live without it. Down on the street, the crowds outside began to chant her name. The city's noise swelled upward, echoing through the glass tower like an anthem born from struggle. Zoe watched, silent, unshaken, illuminated by the light of her own conviction. For the first time, the reflection staring back at her did not belong to the woman they once told to wait outside. It belonged to the woman who had finally walked through every door. The next morning broke under a strange kind of calm, one that did not feel peaceful but poised. The city below Meridian's glass tower buzzed with conversation. On every street corner, on every phone screen, Zoe Williams's name appeared beside words like accountability, reckoning, and justice. Inside the building, employees moved differently now. There was a new awareness in their steps, a quietness that was not fear but reflection. The same walls that once echoed with whispered dismissals now carried the sound of reform. Old posters being replaced with new policies, voices once ignored now being invited to the table. In her office, Zoe stood in front of a wide whiteboard filled with handwritten notes, arrows, and color-coded timelines. She was outlining what she called the 7-minute policy blueprint, a framework that would permanently embed transparency, bias review, and ethical oversight into Meridian's DNA. Nia entered with a tablet in hand, her face lit with the subtle rush of victory. Miss Williams, you should see this. Overnight analytics show a 62% increase in job applicants from minority groups. Universities are citing your speech in their ethics courses. Even our competitors are rebranding their diversity programs to sound like ours. Zoe smiled faintly without looking up from the board. They will imitate the surface before they understand the soul. Nia chuckled softly. Imitation still spreads the message. Zoe capped her marker and turned around. That is how revolutions begin, in imitation, but they survive in consistency. Before Nia could reply, the intercom buzzed. Miss Williams, the receptionist said, a visitor is here for you. She says it is personal. Zoe frowned slightly. Name? She says her name is Tasha Green. Zoe looked up sharply. Send her in. A moment later, the glass doors opened, and Tasha entered the young analyst from the cafe, her eyes filled with awe and nerves. She was neatly dressed, holding a folder pressed to her chest like a shield. Miss Williams, she said softly, I do not mean to interrupt. I just wanted to thank you in person. I am one of the analysts from the East Branch. After your reforms, they reopened my case from 2 years ago. I got my position back, and more than that, I got heard. Zoe's expression softened. You never needed me to be heard, Tasha. You just needed them to start listening. Tasha hesitated, then opened her folder. I brought something. It is a proposal for the scholarship fund, the Wait Outside initiative. I wanted to expand it beyond finance. There are people like me in law, medicine, tech people who keep being told they are not the right fit. We could build a network, not just a fund. Nia raised her eyebrows, impressed. That is ambitious. Tasha nodded quickly. Ambition is the only thing they cannot take from you, ma'am. Zoe smiled, a real smile this time. Sit down, Tasha. Let us look at it together. The three women sat around the desk, their reflections overlapping on the polished surface as they reviewed the proposal. The plan was bold scholarships, mentorship programs, community partnerships. It turned a moment of defiance into a lasting system of opportunity. When they finished, Zoe closed the folder gently. This, she said, is how legacy begins, not with power, but with permission. You have mine. Tasha blinked, speechless. You mean? Yes, Zoe said. You will oversee it. The Wait Outside initiative will not belong to me. It will belong to the people it serves. You will direct it. Naya grinned. Congratulations, Miss Green. Tasha's eyes shimmered with tears. I thank you, Miss Williams. I will not let you down. Zoe reached across the table, her tone soft but certain. Do not aim to please me, Tasha. Aim to outgrow me. That is how you honor the door that was opened for you. Tasha nodded, breath trembling. Yes, ma'am. When she left, the silence in the room carried a kind of warmth, an echo of possibility. Nia looked at Zoe. You just handed away one of your most powerful projects. Zoe returned to the window, watching the city gleam under the noon light. Power does not shrink when shared. It multiplies. Across town, in the same newsroom that once analyzed her every move, a group of journalists now debated a different question. A producer leaned over his desk and said, She did not just win the narrative, she rewrote the language. We are no longer talking about damage control. We are talking about moral leadership. The editor replied, That is why they fear her. She is turning ethics into influence. Later that afternoon, Naomi Chen entered Zoe's office carrying a sealed envelope. Miss Williams, we finished the external audit. The federal investigators reviewed the data you provided. They confirmed everything, the cover-ups, the deleted files, the illegal diversions. They are launching an official inquiry. Zoe took the envelope, feeling the weight of it before opening it. So it is official now. Yes, Naomi said. You will likely be called to testify. Zoe nodded. Good. I have been waiting 12 years to tell that story. Naomi hesitated. This will not be easy. Some of the people implicated still hold influence in government and finance. There will be backlash. Zoe smiled faintly. Backlash is the sound of progress touching power. Naomi exhaled, almost smiling. You never hesitate, do you? Zoe looked toward the window, the skyline reflected in her eyes. Only when it matters who I silence by standing still. Naomi nodded and left, leaving Zoe alone with the envelope. She placed it on her desk, untouched for a moment, then whispered to herself, Every system resists its own correction. That is how you know it needs one. As evening fell, the golden light faded into blue. Down below, the plaza in front of Meridian's headquarters began to fill with people. Former employees, community leaders, students, activists. They were holding candles, banners, and quiet strength. The phrase, "We no longer wait outside," was projected across the glass tower, glowing against the night sky. From her office, Zoe watched them gather. Nia joined her at the window. They are here for you, she said softly. Zoe shook her head. No, they are here for themselves. I am just the echo of what they already believed. Nia smiled. Still, you gave it a voice. Outside, the candles flickered in a pattern that looked almost like stars reflected in glass. Zoe placed a hand on the window. Stars, she said quietly. That is what waiting people look like from a distance, quiet, countless, and full of fire. Oh. The two women stood there in silence, watching the light spread, realizing that the story was no longer about revenge or reform. It was about recognition. The world had told Zoe Williams to wait outside. She had opened the door, and now the whole city was stepping through it. The morning after the candlelight gathering arrived with an unusual quiet. It was not the quiet of exhaustion, but of collective breath, the kind of stillness that follows a night when something inside a city has shifted and the streets are still learning to hold the change. From her office, Zoe Williams could see the plaza below. The wax stains from the candles had left pale circles across the concrete, like constellations drawn by hand. A cleaning crew moved gently among them, careful not to erase the memory of what had happened there. Nia Thompson entered, balancing 2 cups of coffee and a folder under her arm. Good morning, Miss Williams. You did not sleep again, did you? Zoe smiled faintly. Sleep feels like a luxury on days like this. Nia placed the folder on her desk. This is from the Federal Commission, the official summons. You are scheduled to testify next week. Zoe took the envelope, sliding a finger along the seal but not opening it yet. They want the story in public record. Nia nodded. And they want you to name names. Zoe exhaled slowly, the words carrying both weight and calm. Then we will give them the truth, not as revenge, but as record. She turned toward the window again. How are the employees? Nia checked her tablet. The mood is mixed. Some are inspired. Others are scared. There are rumors that several executives plan to resign before the inquiry begins. They think it will protect them. Zoe's tone was firm but steady. Resignation does not erase responsibility. Tell them that. Nia typed a quick note. Also, one more thing. The university press has reached out. They want to include your speech in a new anthology called Voices of Modern Leadership. Zoe smiled softly. Let them publish it. But make sure they understand the words only matter if the actions remain. Nia returned the smile. Understood. The intercom buzzed. Miss Williams, said the receptionist, there is a call for you. It is from a number listed as private. Zoe hesitated for half a second before answering. Put it through. A deep voice came across the speaker. Miss Williams, this is Senator Reeves. I will be chairing the Federal Commission next week. I wanted to speak with you directly. Zoe straightened in her chair. Good morning, Senator. I assume you have reviewed the files. Yes, he said. And they are significant. What you uncovered reaches far beyond your company. These records suggest collusion between multiple financial institutions to suppress internal discrimination cases. You are about to expose something much larger than Meridian. Zoe's eyes narrowed slightly. Then it is about time someone did. The senator hesitated. You will face enormous pressure. Powerful people will want you silent. I have lived through silence, Senator, Zoe said calmly. It is not as powerful as people think. Ugh. There was a pause on the line. Then the senator said, I will see you next week. When the call ended, the room felt heavier but clearer. Nia looked at Zoe with quiet awe. You realize what this means, right? This is not just about one company anymore. This is about an entire industry. Zoe's tone softened but remained resolute. Every system that learns how to hide injustice eventually teaches the same lesson. Transparency is rebellion. And rebellion, when done right, becomes restoration. Nia nodded slowly. You are going to change how corporate America defines justice. Zoe turned to her. No. We are going to remind it what justice sounds like when it speaks without fear. That afternoon, Naomi Chen arrived with a portable hard drive and several binders. Her eyes were tired but fierce. We finished the cross-referencing, Miss Williams. The files contain financial transactions that prove hush payments to terminated employees, 22 cases in total. The funds came from a discretionary budget signed off by multiple directors. Zoe's face remained composed, though her voice dropped lower. They paid for silence. Naomi nodded. For years. Nia clenched her jaw. And now they will pay for truth. Zoe took the drive from Naomi and placed it carefully in a steel lockbox on her desk. This, she said quietly, is the sound of the old world closing its doors. Let us make sure the next one opens wider. Naomi hesitated, then said softly, Miss Williams, there is something else. When you testify, the world will see not just a leader but a symbol. You will be the face of an entire movement. Are you ready for that? Zoe looked out the window, where sunlight caught on the skyline, scattering in bright reflections. Symbols are dangerous, she said. People worship them instead of becoming them. I do not want followers, I want witnesses. Naomi nodded. Then you already have millions. When Naomi left, Nia turned toward Zoe. You are calm for someone about to walk into war. Zoe gave a quiet, almost amused smile. Calm does not mean unshaken. It means ready. Later that evening, the plaza outside the building was once again filled with people. Not protesters this time, students, community workers, and former employees gathered for an open forum called Inside the Glass. A large screen displayed the phrase, "We no longer wait outside." Zoe stood near the edge of the balcony overlooking them, unseen but listening. Tasha Green stood at the microphone on the stage below, her voice carrying across the night air. When I started here, Tasha said, I used to walk past the executive floor and tell myself, do not dream too loud, because I was afraid that someone would hear it and take it away. But today, I learned something different. Dreaming out loud is how you remind the world that you exist. The crowd applauded softly, some wiping tears. Tasha continued. Miss Williams told me that doors do not just open for the people who knock hardest. They open for the people who refuse to leave. So this space, this company, this moment is no longer about waiting. It is about walking through together. From the balcony above, Zoe closed her eyes for a brief second, letting the words sink into her like sunlight. When she opened them, she saw faces illuminated by candlelight again, by hope, by purpose. It no longer looked like a crowd. It looked like a future. Nia stepped beside her and whispered, "You could go down there, you know. They would love to hear from you." Zoe shook her head gently. "They do not need me tonight. They have each other. That is the real victory." The music started below a slow rhythm that rose like a heartbeat. The lights from the stage glowed upward, catching the glass panels of the tower. Each reflection looked like a window full of fire. Zoe turned away, walking back into her office, leaving the balcony door open so the sound could follow her inside. The night wind brushed across her desk, fluttering the pages of her testimony notes. She placed a hand over them and whispered quietly, "Tomorrow, we tell the truth. And this time, the world will not look away." Outside, the chant began again, stronger, unified. "We no longer wait outside." The sound rose through the city, climbing floor by floor, until it reached the glass office where Zoe stood, a single voice multiplied by thousands, echoing through the night like the sound of justice learning how to breathe. The day of testimony began in silence, the kind that lives between heartbeat and history. Washington, D.C. was bathed in gray light, the streets wet from an early morning drizzle. Reporters lined the courthouse steps, microphones raised, lenses glinting like 1,000 watchful eyes. Zoe Williams stepped from the black sedan, every movement deliberate, unhurried. Her suit was midnight blue, her hair pinned with precision, her expression calm but unyielding. She did not look like a woman arriving to defend herself. She looked like someone arriving to define truth. As she climbed the marble steps, the crowd hushed. Somewhere behind the barricades, a young woman called out, "We see you, Miss Williams." Zoe turned her head briefly, nodded once, then entered the building. Inside, the congressional chamber was a theater of power rows of senators, seated in an arc, a polished mahogany table gleaming under bright lights. Cameras rolled silently from the corners. At the center sat Senator Reeves, his gavel poised, his eyes steady. "Miss Williams," he began, "thank you for appearing before this committee. The documents you provided have uncovered one of the largest corporate cover-ups in recent memory. Today, we ask that you help us understand not only how it happened, but how we stop it from happening again." Zoe adjusted the microphone, her voice low but clear. "Thank you, Senator. What happened at Meridian was not a single failure. It was a culture perfected in quiet. The suppression of complaints was not negligence. It was design, a design that rewards obedience and punishes truth. Murmurs rippled across the chamber. She continued, her cadence steady, cinematic. "For years, systems like these have trained people to mistake silence for loyalty. But silence does not protect institutions. It poisons them." Senator Reeves leaned forward. "You believe this goes beyond Meridian?" Zoe nodded. "Yes, Senator. This is not a company problem. It is an American problem. We have built industries on the illusion of meritocracy while ignoring the bias buried in their foundations. What happened inside Meridian is happening everywhere. People mistake equality for equity." A journalist in the back scribbled furiously. Another raised a camera and caught her expression a mixture of calm, pain, and power. Zoe continued. "The files you have contain 74 names, but they represent thousands who were never recorded. People told to wait, to comply, to fit. They built the glass towers you sit under. They were told those towers were transparent. They were not." "Oh." Senator Reeves lowered his pen, visibly moved. "Miss Williams, what would you have us do?" Zoe looked directly into the sea of faces before her. "Do not legislate protection," she said softly. "Legislate participation. Give the people most silenced the power to rewrite the rules, because no policy will ever be as strong as the people it ignores." The room went completely still. Zoe leaned forward, her final words deliberate, unwavering. "The world told us to wait outside. We waited long enough. The door is open now, and it will never close again." When she finished, no one spoke. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. And in that charged, perfect silence, it was clear justice was no longer a conversation. It was a reckoning already in motion. When Zoe Williams stepped out of the courthouse, the air met her like applause made of wind. The gray clouds that had followed her in the morning had parted into clean light, streaking across the city's marble buildings. The steps were crowded, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, supporters chanting her name, but Zoe did not raise her voice or wave her hand. She simply walked, calm and centered, like a storm that had already passed. Nia was waiting at the bottom of the stairs with a car door open. That was historic, she said softly as Zoe approached. The networks are calling it the speech of the decade. They are comparing you to leaders who reshaped civil rights. Zoe paused before getting in, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. They will call it many things, she said, but what matters is what happens when the cameras turn away. They drove through the city in silence for a few minutes. Every digital billboard they passed replayed clips from her testimony, her calm defiance, her steady voice. Words like truth, reckoning, and reform flashed in bold white letters across the screens. Nia turned to her. Senator Reeves just announced an immediate task force for corporate accountability. The first of its kind. You started it. Zoe looked out the window, watching the city blur by. I started a conversation, she said. Now it belongs to everyone who was ever told to wait. As they crossed the Potomac, Zoe's phone buzzed. A message from Tasha Green appeared on the screen. We are ready to launch the Wait Outside network. The first mentors are signing up. We did it, Miss Williams. Zoe smiled quietly, her reflection ghosting against the car glass. They did it, she murmured. That evening, back in her office, the skyline glowed in streaks of gold and violet. The entire tower of Meridian shimmered like it had been reborn. On the plaza below, crowds gathered again not to protest, but to celebrate. People held candles, not for mourning this time, but for gratitude. Nia entered, holding a glass of water. The stock market closed higher today. Investors are calling this the beginning of the Williams effect. Accountability is trending up, and so is profit. Zoe chuckled softly. Who would have thought integrity could be good for business? Nia smiled. You proved it could. Zoe walked to the window. Below, she saw faces, young, old, black, brown, white, all lifted toward the tower that once represented exclusion. Now, it reflected them back. This is not my victory, Zoe said quietly. This is the world remembering its reflection. Nia joined her at the window. So what now? Zoe looked at the horizon, where the city lights met the fading day. Now, she said, we build. Her voice softened but held its weight. We build doors where there were walls. We build systems that do not need saviors. We build a future that never asks anyone to wait outside again. Outside, the first stars appeared small, steady, unstoppable. And for the first time in a long time, the world did not feel divided between who was inside and who was not. It felt whole, standing together in the glow of its own awakening. Weeks passed, but the echo of Zoe Williams' testimony did not fade. It deepened. Every news cycle carried her words. Every company with a public statement about diversity was suddenly being asked the same question, where is your Zoe Williams? Across America, glass towers began to feel a little less untouchable. Employees in boardrooms started speaking with more courage. Journalists started asking harder questions, and policies that had gathered dust were finally being rewritten. Change no longer sounded like shouting. It sounded like progress learning to breathe. Inside the headquarters of Meridian, the rhythm of the building had changed completely. The marble floors that once reflected hierarchy now mirrored collaboration. Every week, departments held open sessions called truth tables, where anyone, regardless of title, could challenge policy or share an idea. For the first time, leadership listened. For the first time, people were not afraid to be seen. In the center of it all, Zoe sat in her office surrounded by light. The Wait Outside network had expanded beyond the company. It had become a national foundation. Scholarships, mentorship programs, partnerships with universities, it was spreading faster than any brand campaign ever had. Nia entered holding a report. The numbers are staggering, she said. We have 2,000 new applicants for the mentorship program and 40 confirmed sponsors. People are calling it the Williams generation. Zoe smiled softly. Names fade. Impact remains. Nia nodded. Still, it feels like we are witnessing history. Zoe looked out at the city skyline, where sunlight struck the windows of other towers, the same kind of glass that had once reflected her exclusion. History is not what we witness, Nia, she said. It is what we build when the witnessing is over. She turned back to her desk, where a handwritten letter rested on top of a neat stack of documents. It was from Marcus Harris, the former security guard. The words were short but steady. I finished the compliance program. I am now leading the fairness division. Thank you for seeing the man behind the uniform. Zoe traced her finger across the ink, her eyes softening. He was the first to stand still long enough to see what silence costs. Nia smiled. And now he teaches others how not to repeat it. The office phone buzzed. Miss Williams, the receptionist said, there is a journalist here to see you. She says she is writing a feature titled, The Woman Who Changed the Door. Zoe hesitated for a moment, then said, send her up. When the journalist entered, she carried only a small notebook. Miss Williams, I have interviewed senators, activists, and CEOs, she said, but none of them describe what you did as leadership. They call it awakening. What do you call it? Zoe leaned back, eyes calm, voice even. I call it remembering. Power never belonged to the gatekeepers. It always belonged to the people waiting outside. The journalist lowered her pen, moved by the simplicity of the answer. And what would you say to those people now? Zoe smiled faintly. Do not wait for permission. The world needs your footsteps, not your patience. The journalist nodded, understanding that this was not just a quote, it was a calling. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, the light poured through the office windows in a warm, endless glow. And for a brief moment, it seemed as though the city itself was bowing to her, to the woman who refused to wait, who turned humiliation into history, and who made glass walls transparent enough for everyone to see through. Night returned to the city, quiet but alive. The lights of Meridian shimmered against the skyline like a constellation newly named. Down on the plaza, the final words of Zoe Williams's address had been etched into the marble, "We no longer wait outside." People stopped to touch the letters as they passed, their reflections glowing in the glass above. In her office, Zoe stood alone. The city stretched wide beneath her. She looked not at what she had built, but at what she had begun, the movement now living beyond her hands. Her reflection in the window no longer seemed singular. It was joined by countless others, layered over hers like generations finally standing together. Nia entered quietly. They are waiting downstairs, Miss Williams. The next board, the first chosen under the new charter. Zoe turned, her voice calm, almost tender. Then let them in. She glanced once more at the skyline and smiled. Doors were never meant to close forever. As she stepped out into the hall, the light followed her, spilling forward, soft and certain, the kind of light that does not ask permission to enter because it already belongs there. The world had changed, and this time, everyone was inside.